For those of you who aren't yet familiar with the Israel-Asia Center, the Israel-Asia Center is an Israeli independent, not-for-profit organization dedicated to informing, empowering, and connecting the Israel-Asia leaders of tomorrow towards building a more sustainable future in the Asian century. We run a range of public education and thought leadership events, as well as leadership programs focused on building future leaders in Israel-Asia relations. Just highlighting one of our programs, we run an annual Israel-Indonesia Futures program, bringing together emerging and established leaders from Israel and Indonesia for high-level networking, mutual understanding, and partnership building. And we're going to be announcing details of that our 2024 program shortly on our website and through our newsletter. Today's briefing is an opportunity to learn more about the current situation in Israel, about the Israel-Gaza conflict and implications for normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia and ultimately Indonesia. And there'll also be an opportunity to ask questions. A little bit of housekeeping. Please note that while today's session is being recorded, no one's names will be included in the recording. It will just be recording the speakers only. We'll begin with a 10-minute briefing by each of our speakers, after which we'll open up to Q&A. So introducing our speakers for today, Ambassador Mark Sofer is a member of the Israel-Asia Center's Advisory Council. Most recently, he served as Israel's ambassador to Australia between 2017 and 2020. And prior to this, he served as the Deputy Director General and Head of Asia and the Pacific at the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From 2007 to 2011, Ambassador Sofer was Israel's ambassador to India and non-resident ambassador to Sri Lanka. And during the course of his distinguished career in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, other diplomatic posts he has held include Deputy Director General, Head of Central Europe and Eurasia Division at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador of Israel to Ireland, Head of the Division for Middle Eastern Economic Affairs, Deputy Consul General in New York, as well as posts in Norway and Peru in the early 1990s. And he also served as policy advisor to then Foreign Minister Shimon Peres. Emmanuel Shachaf serves as CEO of Technology Asia Consulting and is the vice chair of the Israel-Indonesia Chamber of Commerce. He's also a member of the Council for Peace and Security and is a member of a board member of the Israel-Asia Chamber of Commerce and a program advisor to the Israel-Asia Center's Israel-Indonesia Futures Program. Between 1979 and 1986, Mr. Shachaf served as a staff officer in the Israeli Air Force, and he then spent 2 years in the US studying for an MBA. In 1989, he returned to Israel and joined the Office of the Prime Minister in Tel Aviv, where he served in various positions, both in Israel and in Southeast Asia, until his retirement in 2003. He then worked to develop Israeli business relations with Indonesia and became politically active in the Israel Labour Party, competing for a place on Labour's Knesset list in 2012. Mr. Shachaf regularly contributes op-ed pieces to the Times of Israel, and in 2019, he published his biography, Identity, The Quest for Israel's Future. We're going to start with a briefing by Ambassador Mark Sofer. Ambassador Sofer, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Unmute yourself.
Thank you very much indeed, Rebecca. And I should perhaps start by saying that despite the fact that I was a member of the Israeli diplomatic corps for just under 40 years, today I'm not, and I represent only myself. And in fact, I'm very critical of the present government, and for a number of reasons that even that certainly preceded the the current crisis, the current war. But now, of course, we all stand together in unity as we are faced with one of the biggest horrors, or perhaps the biggest horror we've had since the founding of the State of Israel in 1948. Now, I know that you've all been glued to your television sets for the last, well, since the 7th of October, but nonetheless, a word or two about what actually has been going on, especially since I know that not all of the press reporting and not all of the media reporting has been 100% objective, to say the least. As you know, on the 7th of October, over 1,000 Hamas jihadists, terrorists really, came into Israeli territory and went on can only be called an orgy of butchery, savagery, slaughter, killing, rape, beheading, burning alive of entire families. And now I know that many of you haven't been aware of what's going on. I don't want to go into too much of the horrible details of what's going on, but in order to understand what had been going on, I could say the following thing. On the 7th of October, just about 3 days ago, the Israeli government showed about 100 of the foreign press situated here in Israel, some of the footage taken by Hamas themselves during the invasion of these butchers on the 7th of October. The footage was so gruesome that I can't go into too much detail, but I can say that some of the journalists were physically sick, were vomiting, others fainted, and they came out of there, all of them, in a state of utter and complete shock. Again, in order to understand the depth of the horror that the hundreds of thousands of Israelis down in south actually went through, such atrocities as cutting open a pregnant woman, pulling out the baby and beheading it, and then beheading her, shooting a father in front of his two sons, and then forcing them into the house, and then with the mother, and burning the house down, beheading babies, mass rape and the list goes on and on. It's so awful that I can't describe it. Nobody can describe it. And last, certainly but not least, the brutal abduction of 225 or 226 innocent people going around their daily lives, including babies who are still in need of, who still can't eat, still need milk, 90-year-old women and things, and people of that nature, and everything in between. 222 people are still languishing in Gaza under the sequestration, really, of the Hamas. So this is the horror that we've been through, and as a result of this horror, of this carnage, of this butchery and savagery, we find ourselves at war. It's not a war that we wanted, it's not a war that we started, but it's a war that we will not and cannot, under any circumstances, lose. I think any single country in the world, every single country in the world, would use the right to defend themselves, would take the initiative in order that such a horror should not just happen anymore with us, but shouldn't happen anymore anywhere else in the world. It's our right. Indeed, I would say it's our duty, and we will continue that duty until the very end, until Hamas as a military force has been decimated to the extent that it doesn't exist anymore, and as a political force has no command and no ruling over the Gaza district, which is on our south. And those are the aims, strategic aims of the war, which was thrust upon us. But not only that, of course, the freeing and the release, in the unconditional release of the 220 plus hostages that were abducted, really, in such a brutal manner on that day and the day after. Now, the reasons why Hamas carried this out was not in order to get the state of Israel to disappear, because that won't happen, and they know they can't do it, and they know that that won't be, that the outcome of all of this will not be a Israeli defeat. The only reason that they carried out this slaughter, this butchery, this jihadist savagery, was in order to cause as much death, destruction, and carnage as possible. There's no other reason for it, and this is the nature jihad movements, of extreme Islamism. And I make the enormous distinction between Islam and Islamism. To my mind, Islamism is of the sense of what the Hamas had done is an abuse of Islam. It's a misuse of Islam. It's a disgrace to Islam. And yet these are the people who are working in the name of Islam and at the same time raping hundreds and thousands of people, causing death and destruction in their wake. So we don't equate this at all with Islam or with Muslims. The opposite is the case. It is Islamism rather than Islam. Now, a number of the, I'd like a word or two really about, in order to keep myself into the 10 minutes, a word or two really about the international press, if I might. Now, all international aspects in general, not just of the press. Even from stage one, even from the time that it was happening on the 7th of October, there were immediately, even before Israel had a chance, while we were still burying our dead, we were still reeling from the utter horror and the shock of the slaughter that we'd been through. There were already demonstrations in the streets of a number of cities throughout the world saying that this was justified, saying that you can do this, saying that putting it to some sort of crazed lunatic perspective, which doesn't exist under any circumstances, but that's what they were doing. These took the form in a number of cases of pure unbridled anti-Semitism. We saw, for example, a demonstration on the 8th in Sydney, before Israel had even embarked on its strategic approach to dealing with the Hamas. The screaming horde in Sydney calling for the death of Jews. I won't use the expletives that they actually used around the world, where carrying posters saying that we need the world clean of Jews, pure unbridled anti-Semitism, not just in Sydney, but in certain cities in Europe, etc. Which means, sadly, I have to say this, that even among populations such as your own or such as in Europe, there are cells, there are bodies, there are throngs, even in certain cases, of people who support this type of butchery and this type of crazed murder. And this, to a certain extent, found its expression not sometimes subconsciously, sometimes consciously in the international media. And they were too often ready to lap up the lies that were given to them by the Hamas authorities. For example, and we use this as an example, but it's just one example, the Al-Ahli hospital in northern Gaza, which suddenly one day, I think it was on the 4th day of the fighting, the Hamas came out and said 500 people have been killed by an Israeli bomb on this hospital. Now, this was taken up and picked up by countless news services around the world. Nobody thought to question it. Nobody thought that why should a Hamas be lying? This was, I revert to saying that this was an organization that has just murdered 1,400 people. Why should they lie is really hard. Their last problem they have on their minds. It was even picked up by some of the Western media, such as the New York Times, the BBC, and basically portrayed as being true that Israel had bombed this hospital. It turned out, and later the BBC, the New York Times, I don't think Al Jazeera, unfortunately, but okay, but others, that others had picked this up, that they apologized for the reporting, they apologized for the way that it had been portrayed, and they said this wasn't happened, it was in fact a Hamas rocket that misfired, as indeed 450 out of the almost 150,000 missiles that have been thrown at Israel indiscriminately over the past 2 weeks. This was one which backfired. So it was them killing their own people in their own hospital. And I say that because under no circumstances ever does Israel and will Israel attack a hospital. And I said any hospital, any medical facility whatsoever, because it is entirely uppermost in our minds that any involved civilian in Gaza who are not connected to the Hamas, as few as possible should be hurt and injured. And the reason I say that, because we have our strategic aims, which I mentioned earlier. which is to eradicate the Hamas as a military movement and to make sure it doesn't exist in the future as a political movement of any ruling force. We could achieve that aim in a couple of hours. We could achieve that aim without any ground invasion, without any movement of forces into Gaza by troops, which actually endangers the troops tremendously, puts them in the line of fire, by just aerial activity. This would be the very, very last thing on our minds. The very last thing. We would never do that. And the reason that we would never do that is because we really are trying to limit collateral damage, trying to really limit the amount of uninvolved civilians that would be injured. That doesn't mean to say that we will be 100% successful. We won't be. This is a war that was thrust upon us, and in war, sadly, tragically, these things happen. But we will do our utmost, even to put ourselves in danger by trying to limit that as much as we possibly can. So you should know, really and truly, despite what you may be reading, despite what you may be hearing, there is no thought whatsoever in Israel of indiscriminate targeting of anybody who is uninvolved with the Hamas. Yes, there is thought of eradicating the entire Hamas military leadership. I won't hide that. They are hiding in tunnels to a large extent under the city. They, instead of using the money to build the schools, hospitals, medical facilities, or education, or whatever, health, they have built an underground system of tunnels worthy, which is really international in its sophistication. That's where the money has gone. The international money has gone. That's what they have done, not a thought for the population. And we are insisting on calling for all citizens of the north of Gaza to move to the south, so that we will not encounter we encounter as few civilians as possible. The Hamas is not only stopping them from, or trying to stop them from reaching the south by putting up road blockades and by physically standing there and pushing them back, but there are now reports of them shooting at their own civilians in order to stop them from moving south. So we're taking all of that into consideration, and we're trying to overcome the problem of the Hamas using their own people, not just us, as human shields, but also to reach the strategic aim which we cannot fail to achieve. We must not fail to achieve. And finally, a word, I think, if I might, especially to you as Indonesians. You are a country with which we have a great deal of respect. We may not have official relationships. We may not be in dialogue each and every day on an official level. But the respect in Israel for Indonesia, for Indonesian civilization, for its culture, for its moderation, for its leadership is, you may not know this, but it's perhaps unparalleled in almost any other country in the world. And as a result of that, we know where you're coming from on a humanitarian level, and we know, or we believe strongly, that you can do an extreme, or use an extreme amount of influence to help on a humanitarian level only to release, to facilitate the release of the hostages. Not only to facilitate their release, but some of them are in need of medical equipment. Some have cancer. Some are autistic. Some are babies who are in need of simple, basic food, staple foodstuffs. And of course, the release is first and foremost of the children, the elderly, and the women. But of course, of everyone. Indonesia has a unique position in this, given the respect that it garners in the Muslim world, in the Western world, and in Israel too. And I stress that. So if there's anybody here that can find a way to use Indonesian influence to facilitate the release of hostages, to facilitate this war crime, which it is, of taking innocent people and using them as human shields, we would be eternally grateful to you. And if any of you wish to do so behind the scenes and without international, without public, then I can be contacted through Rebecca or however. And I stand at your service. I am a senior member of the voluntary NGO of the Forum for Missing Hostages and Families. And this is something which is absolutely uttermost and utmost in our minds. I'll stop there and take questions and answers, presumably, hopefully, after Emmanuel has had his say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
So I'm going to hand it over to you now, Emmanuel, and then we'll open up to Q&A.
Hello, good evening. Just like Mark said, that after 40 years with the government, he became more like a member of the opposition. I'm also, after 21 years with the government, I'm more with the opposition. But now we're all together in this very, very serious crisis, probably the worst crisis Israel has suffered since its existence. Because the sneak attack on October 7th had reverberations which reminded us of things that happened in the Holocaust. So this is something that should never have happened. I'll show you what happened on the ground on the 7th of October on the slides, which I'll share now, right, just a moment. First, you'll see the picture. This is Israel, as you can see. You can see here the West Bank area in green, the Gaza Strip down here in green, the border to Lebanon, which isn't quiet either. Okay, we have a problem here at the Gaza Strip where the sneak attack started on October 7th. We have a problem here along the border with Lebanon, where Hezbollah is shooting from time to time and sending people into the shelters. And we have a problem in the West Bank, where both the Palestinians are acting up and also some of our settlers are doing their share to keep this area at unrest. So we have potentially a three-front situation. So let's look at the Gaza Strip. Hold up. Oh, just hold on. Here's the Gaza Strip. This area is about 380 square kilometers, about 45 kilometers long, 15 kilometers wide, on average. On the 7th of October, on Saturday morning, they started about 6:30 with a very strong rocket bombardment of the whole of Israel. Actually, I live here in the center of the country, and there was an alarm in our area, but most of the effort was concentrated on the area around the Gaza Strip. All these settlements, these black settlements, are all civilian settlements with a few army bases interspersed. The attack came at 10 places across the border with Gaza here, and at 10 different places. They surprised the army, which was really literally caught pants down. And most of the attack was directed against civilians, as Mark said. They did terrible carnage to our civilian settlements, most of the kibbutzim. There are several 10,000 settlers here, not settlers, but the people who live here in the kibbutzim. And the border was breached again in the end at up to 80 places. And it took the army until Monday to get all the invaders out. Now you can see here the red line, markation line, is the line which marks the penetration of the terrorists into Israel here. Unfortunately, there was a big festival going on which had several thousand participants in this area here in the middle, and they were caught in the attack, and many of them were killed and butchered by the terrorists. So that's the geopolitical situation. So that's good. Let me stop sharing. Okay. And now, what situation do we find ourselves in? We're basically now trying to pursue our aims, our strategic aims that Mark explained in the Gaza Strip, which is eliminating Hamas, which hasn't been done before. And I don't think anybody really knows how to do that, but it probably will mean that we have to enter the Gaza Strip. And today, it was announced already that Israeli forces are operating in the Gaza Strip with tanks and other things. I forgot to show you something that I wanted to show on the Gaza map. Hold it. Just a moment. This line here is the line between northern part of the Gaza Strip and the southern part of the Gaza Strip. This is the line here beyond which Gazans are safe. So this is Israel is asking the population of Gaza to move into that area, which is accessible from Egypt and where there's humanitarian supplies can be provided to the area. Okay, this is just for your information. Go back. This is the situation right now. We're bombing in Gaza. We're still warning of bombs ahead of time in order to prevent major collateral damage. At the same time, we're trying to keep the fires low because we're worried that the north of Israel will be involved in war with Hezbollah, which is also one of the reasons the United States have become involved, because they want to prevent Iranian involvement. We have a huge hostage crisis, which is very, very problematic for Israel. Israelis are extremely concerned about their hostages, not understandably. And there are also quite a lot of foreigners involved. There are dozens of foreigners who are among the hostages. So that hostage crisis also has to be taken into consideration when there's any military moves. There's a huge economic burden on Israel at this time. We have about 350,000 soldiers under arms right now, which is just keeping them on reserve duty is about $100 million a day. Not to talk about the impact to the economy, which is projected to lose about 18% on a yearly basis in the first quarter of 2024. So that's going to count in also. The other problem is the West Bank, which I said is acting up quite substantially, mainly because of also caused by the settlers, but also caused by terrorists under the Palestinian Authority. So we have our work cut out for us, and it's clear that the fact that we are a very strong country militarily cannot come to bear to the extent we'd like it to, because of humanitarian concerns. One other factor we have to keep in mind is the Israeli Arab population, which so far has been completely loyal, and there haven't been any problems. But if the situation in the West Bank starts to act up further, and if the war starts to become more intensive than it is now, we cannot exclude that may also be a problem, and that's a considerable problem. So we have to work hard, keep our fingers crossed. We hope for international pressure to move towards some kind of agreement that lets the hostages out. The US government is putting a lot of pressure on our government for several reasons in order, first of all, to prevent the war of expanding further. The US have forces in the area, and they have to protect these forces before anything can happen. They also don't trust the Israeli government and want to keep a close tab on what we do. So this is also weighing in. So all things considered, this is, I think, the worst situation, the worst crisis Israel has been in since its existence, and the worst casualties and the most terrible carnage that has ever been caused to us. It's a lot worse than the Yom Kippur War in 1973, which was mainly affected the army and not so much the civilian population. In this case, the civilian population was very, very badly hit, evoking memories of the Holocaust, something that should have never happened in Israel, and so we have to take it from there. So thank you. I'm waiting for your questions.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I'm going to open up to Q&A now. I'm just going to enable the Q&A. and you're free. I'd like to invite the audience to post questions. If we won't mention your name and who's asked the question unless you post your name just before your question. So if you'd like us to mention your name, just post your name before the question. Otherwise, we'll just read your question. Just to just now enabled the chat. And I see that there are some questions coming in. Okay. Okay, so we have a question asking if the attack has any correlation with the normalization plan with Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries, after which Indonesia might follow. And if yes, who are those who really benefited or most benefited from this chaos? Perhaps Mark, you could address this question first.
Well, I think yes. The answer is that certainly had certain input into the Hamas calculations, but I wouldn't place it at the top of the Hamas calculations. I think at the top of the calculations of Hamas was the just bestial slaughter of a jihadist movement. Which was maybe received a bit of a spur or a bit of a trigger from the normalization that's been going on between Israel and quite a large part of the Arab world. As you know, we've already had relations with Egypt and with Jordan for some time, ongoing negotiations with the Palestinians, and to that was added the UAE, Morocco, and Bahrain, and in the wings, much has been talked about with Saudi Arabia. Now, it's important to note that that Hamas jihadism, in fact, this extremism of this butchery anywhere in the Arab world is as much a threat, or is also a threat, not as much a threat, is also a threat to the Arab world itself. We saw how Egypt dealt with the Muslim Brotherhood under Morsi. We saw how what is happening in the fear of Iranian hegemony or we see that in the Gulf world, which feeds in to a certain extent to a Sunni Shia problem, but nonetheless, the Iranians are vastly and strongly behind not only the Hezbollah, which is a Shia organization in Lebanon, but also the Hamas, which is a Sunni movement in Gaza. And yet the hatred of Iran, the viciousness towards Israel from the Iranian regime, and I'm very strong to make the distinction between the Iranian people on the one hand, who are erudite, intelligent, clever, and certainly not extreme, and the Iranian primitive regime, the government of the Ayatollahs, which is a throwback to medieval times, which I'm sure very few Indonesians, in fact, very few people around the world can relate to. They are behind this horror that we saw on the 7th of October, and they are behind the Hezbollah. What you see an Iranian finger, actually anywhere in the Middle East, you see an Iranian hand, anywhere where there's instability, if it's in Iraq, if it's in Yemen, if it's in, even in as far as the Western Sahara, excuse me, in Morocco. And so what we are seeing here is a definite attempt, part of the attempt to start this normalization, if you will, between Israel and the Arab world shouldn't continue. I'm not sure, actually, I don't think that they will be successful in any way because of what I said, because of the anathema of many of the forward-looking Arab and Muslim regimes, governments in the world, their anathema that these governments hold towards Hamas, which they don't see as being anything representative about themselves. And I'm taking aside, actually, right now, some of the statements that are made inside of the Arab world. There's a lot of internal considerations to be made. There's a lot of feeling that Israel should be very careful about its approach towards the Palestinian people. And actually, I can understand that feeling, that approach. But to equate the Palestinian people with Hamas and to equate the Hamas with the Palestinian people, very, very few, if any, are doing it. Only jihadist supporters in Hamas, in Hezbollah, in Iran, and in certain cities throughout Europe and others like Malaysia, actually. So it's very, very difficult. It's very complex. The answer is yes, but for the time being, it will have a stop on the continuation of the normalization. But in the long run, I would like to hope, I don't know yet what's going to pan out in this war, that it won't have a long-term effect.
Thank you. Emmanuel, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I just like I think my response differs slightly from Mark's in the sense that I think the normalization with Saudi Arabia was very much on the Hamas minds when they went into this. In general, not only the normalization, but they wanted to wipe out the status quo. I think that is clear that so many years of a situation which didn't move anywhere for the Palestinians, and Hamas decided to break it and use the opportunity of the normalization with Saudi Arabia as the event to handle and to dispose of, and they did that. And the fact they did that with particular savagery and butchery and carnage was more to cause us to lose our balance. It's clearly was impacted Israel in a way which Israel hasn't been impacted before. Again, because of the terrible imagery of what happened about the carnage of 1,400 citizens who were peaceful in their homes and were killed and murdered and so on. The Hamas definitely wanted us to respond in an irrational way and maybe cause ourselves damage in the long run. So yes, I think the idea of impacting normalization with the Arab countries played a big role, and more so to try to stop the status quo as the way it has been handled in the last 50 years. Thank you.
Can I add, Rebecca, please, to what Emmanuel just said? Again, he may be correct, and I don't know. We're in the realm of speculation or analysis, which could be correct or incorrect. And but whatever the case may be, we both agree that there was an input of that. The question of how large the input was. But I want to add a word or two, if I might, about Indonesia and Israel, which was also part of the question, if I understood correctly. Now, in my belief, and I've been studying and reading and watching Indonesia for many, many years now, long before I was even dealing with it as an Asia expert. I do believe that the relationship between Indonesia and Israel, the formal relationship today, is a bit of an anomaly. We have relations with so many Muslim countries in the world. We have relations with so many of the Arab world, which are directly involved in the Middle East. And we do understand Indonesia's approach to the Palestinian cause. And I'll go even one stage further. I firmly believe that the vast majority, I think that's also borne out by fact, the vast majority of Israelis won't differ from the Indonesian approach of a two-state solution, Israel on one side, Palestine on the other side, living side by side. That's to differ between the mass carnage and the destruction and the support of the worst extremists imaginable. I do think that there's an anomaly there. I do think that it needs to be addressed. And I do think also, though, that this hasn't even for one iota harmed the respect that we have here in Israel for Indonesia, as I said earlier, for Indonesia, its culture, its leadership, etc. So if we could address that later down the line in the context of the normalization with the Arab world, with the context of normalization, that Indonesia can play a greater role in bringing about world peace and harmony, then I would be the first to go out in the streets and dance.
Just a small add-on is that I think we have to look at the the difference between normalization with the governments and normalization with the people. Normalization so far has clearly been with the governments and not with the people. And as long as the people's concerns in the Arab countries who are firmly with the Palestinians are not addressed, I think it'll be very difficult to continue along the path of normalization.
So we have lots of questions coming in. One of the questions is, what do you think the anticipated duration of this situation is? And is there a possibility of it persisting for an extended period akin to the situation that transpired in Ukraine?
Who are you asking?
Mark.
Important to say that, Rebecca, so we don't have this clause. The likelihood is that it will be protracted. I mean, I'm not a military expert, but in order to achieve an aim, a strategic aim, which is an aim which I must say is shared not just by Israel, but by the United States and by many, as I said earlier, of the forward-looking countries in the Middle East and outside it, which is the decimation of Hamas, excuse me, as a military force and as a political leadership in the Gaza area, in the Gaza Strip. I don't expect it to be a quick in and out. It will be long. It will be protracted. Will it resemble the Russian onslaught on Ukraine? I don't believe it will. We don't have any wish for that. And if we can achieve our strategic aim quicker and faster and as quickly as possible, that would be, of course, vastly preferable to a prolonged conflict. On the one hand, it would also reduce the amount of uninvolved casualties. I should say that even as we talk, everyone talks, of course, of non-stop of, and rightly so from their point of view of what's happening in Gaza, but something in the region of 1,000 rockets in the last 3 days, 1,000 missiles have been fired indiscriminately from Gaza into Israeli villages and towns. Hospitals have been destroyed. Nobody talks about those, of course, but it has happened, and we had to evacuate hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people from the south, from their homes. The quicker they, not only from the destroyed kibbutzim and villages of which they were, which were so dangerously damaged to the point of not being livable anymore, but also to those who have been under constant fire for the last 20 days by indiscriminate missiles. So the quicker this is over, the better, but I think that we should be under no illusion that it's going to happen with a sort of a flick of the fingers. It's not going to be. It'll be unfortunately longer, and we have the hostage issue to be dealing with at exactly the same time.
I think
yeah.
I think that it will be extended. It can't be that. It can't approach what's going on in the Ukraine. It just cannot, because the situation on the ground is too dear for the humanitarian situation in Gaza is bad enough for it to be shortened considerably by influence of the United States and other countries, which will put their power to bear in order to make this conflict shorter. In addition, there will be considerable pressure on the government of Israel to shorten this conflict. And I think what will shorten it tremendously will be success with the hostage negotiations. If we can get the hostage situation off the table quickly, the war will be shortened. And we have to keep in mind that as long as it's only in the north, and there is no war only in the south, and there's no accompanying war in the north, we can shorten this considerably. And I think that's everybody's interest, and we have to keep that in mind. We have no interest in prolonging this conflict. But there's too many factors which are not under our control. But it won't be like Ukraine, definitely not.
I see a lot of questions coming in. I want to try to address as many of them as possible. And another question someone has posted here, they ask, the hospital that you talked about earlier, they asked if Israel has shown irrefutable evidence that the hospital bombing was not carried out by Israeli force.
There's no such thing as, sorry.
Yes, please.
There's no such thing as, what kind of evidence? You can't show evidence of something that didn't happen, okay? Let's say that all the evidence that has been produced until now indicates that it wasn't Israel. There's been no evidence produced that indicates that it was Israel, but you can't go beyond that. There has to be a limit somewhere, okay? And that's the situation now. There will be situations where the situation is clear and where it's not clear. In this situation, it's as clear as it can be under a wartime situation with constant bombings going on, that apparently it was not Israel, okay? It's maybe difficult to grasp for some people who had their mindset that it is Israel, but it wasn't Israel, at least not according to the evidence. So if you believe it, fine. If you don't believe it, it's your choice.
Can I add to that, Emmanuel,
Sure.
if I might, and Rebecca? Emmanuel is right, of course. You can't prove that something didn't happen. It wasn't us. It's like us saying that, you know, it's an impossible thing to do. However, as Emmanuel said, all available evidence is completely and utterly unequivocal. And that evidence is the follows. They have video footage. It's open, it's clear, of a series of missiles being shot from about 100 meters away from the hospital, including one which fell directly on the hospital. It backfired and it fell directly from the Hamas. That's number one. Number two, we have telephone reporting of two Hamas operatives, two Hamas terrorists talking to each other, saying that, oh my goodness, we have to blame Israel quickly because otherwise the truth will come out and they'll see that it was us, it was a backfired rocket from us. But most damningly of all, if you ask me, from the evidence that is there, is that all footage, and not just Israeli footage by any means, but Al Jazeera satellite footage, and even footage on the ground taken by health workers, etc. There is no crater. There is no hole. In other words, a bomb which is fired from an aeroplane causes a crater. But when a missile backfires, it just sets alight what it backfires on. And there is no crater there to be seen, not from satellite systems, not Israeli, from international. So you have on the one hand these 3 or 4 or 5 evidence which may not be irrefutable. You can argue, and if somebody decides that Israel's talking nonsense, they will decide that anyway. But facing that, you have Hamas saying it was Israel, and so you have one with evidence, strong evidence showing that it wasn't, and of course our denial that it was, and the other Hamas saying, without showing anything at all, that it was an Israeli attack. It wasn't. And so the bottom line of it all is that anyone chooses to take the word, the unproven word of a jihadist terrorist organization which has just finished carnage on and massacred 1,400 people against proof, which you could argue with if you want, because if you decided that in advance, then so be it. We can't convince everybody all the time, and we do also in life make mistakes. We're not superhuman. We are human beings trying to defend our country against maniacs, perhaps half-drugged maniacs, actually, pouring in and massacring us. And sometimes in conflict situations, any country would make a mistake, and Indonesia knows that from its past, and other countries know that from its past. But to say that we are doing this indiscriminately and firing, that really is, for me, a shame that people would say that. But as I said at the very beginning, even before we responded, people were saying Israel is to be destroyed. Israel has to be. It's okay to rape women. It's okay to behead babies. And so there's really always that will be in the air, and we've learned to live with that over the years.
There's a question here about Israel-Indonesia relations. One of the participants asks, many Indonesian figures suggest that Indonesia open relations with Israel so that Indonesia can then participate in peace efforts between Israel and Palestine. What do you think? Sorry, Emmanuel, do you want to take this first?
Okay. First of all, I've been talking to Indonesians, to high-level people for quite a while, and telling them if they want to get involved in Israel, the Palestinian peace, they should establish relations with Israel, which they haven't selected to do that. This is a situation as good an opportunity as good as ever. But what is riding the Indonesian situation, the Indonesian considerations, is mostly the backing of the people for the Palestinian cause. So unless you have a very strong president who is firmly established in his position, who will make the move and will say, we have to, weigh in on this. We're almost a world power, and we have very good relations with Middle Eastern countries, and we can provide a lot of input to the peace process. He has to take a lot of risks from the opposition, and we've been disappointed again and again. Before the next president comes in, we're all hopeful that when the president comes in, he'll make a move towards Israel. And then when he doesn't. And then when he's in his last year, we say he's got nothing to lose. Maybe he'll do it now, and then he doesn't. And then the same thing happens with the next president. So my hopes aren't very high, in particular because the situation the situation inside Indonesia could be, stability could be threatened if the people weigh in strongly, and they will weigh in strongly in favor of the Palestinians, and they don't see this situation where Indonesia should establish relations with Israel because of that. So we just have to wait and see how this plays out and hope for the best.
I will add a little bit, if I could, to what Emmanuel just said. I think there are three parts to this. First of all, I agree with what he said earlier, in that relations between two countries are not only official relations, but they also are people-to-people relations, industry, science, sharing of know-how, university, academic, press-to-press, people-to-people is very, very important indeed. Number two, as I said earlier, Israel-Indonesian relations are an anomaly. Not only is it good for I must say, I think for Indonesia as one of the world's great powers, when they cut themselves off from 50% of one of the world's greatest conflicts, I don't think it helps, or one of the most intractable or difficult conflicts. I don't think it helps Indonesia's. It doesn't show Indonesia to be in the superpower mold that they're all close to superpower mold that they really should be in, both as an economy, as a size of the country, etc. But third of all, and this is for me most important, I think that Indonesia can play a serious role in helping us. We also need the help, and our Palestinians need the help in helping us solving our problems. And that is perhaps at the bottom of it all. We have, as I said earlier, the most enormous amount of respect for Indonesia. There is no disrespect, and there is no problem whatsoever that Indonesia has taken hook, line, and sinker the Palestinian cause as its cause célèbre. Not at all. We have relations, and strong and good relations, with countries which are much more pro-Palestinian even than Indonesia, and with Muslim countries, etc. And I think that being pro-Palestinian doesn't necessarily mean you're anti-Israeli by any means. And as I said, and I repeat it again, the vast majority of us in Israel understand and respect and actually agree with Indonesia's approach to the solution in the Middle East, which is two states of Israel and Palestine living side by side. And so, yes, it's an anomaly. And yes, it needs to be changed. Can it be changed now when the war is going on? But when the war is over and we've moved into a different mode, and the mode perhaps of trying to think what next and what should we be doing to get to free ourselves of this horror of the conflict, both sides, Indonesia needs to understand, I say that not in a condescending way, that its role that can be played is almost indispensable. It's extremely important for both sides, and we will welcome it despite its approach and despite its support or for the Palestinians, which is accepted by many. It can play a crucial role and an important role in bringing Israel and Palestine together. And that's why I do believe, for all those reasons and more, that anything that we can do to move this process along would be a boon for everybody.
I'm trying to fit in 2 more questions before the end of this webinar. The first is many pro-Palestinian supporters in Indonesia compare Palestine's resistance to their own war with the Netherlands. How can we discuss it and give ample evidence to the vast difference between the 2 historical events? Emmanuel, would you like to address that?
Actually, I was hoping you were going to ask Mark.
We can ask Mark
on this one, because I don't remember the historical details of the Dutch colonial. No, I think the Dutch were at the time against the United Nations when they returned to the former colony in Indonesia. So it's difficult to compare the 2 situations. Israel doesn't see itself, and it definitely is not a colonial power in Palestine. Okay, we have historical connections to the country, so it's not as we came from out of nowhere and wanted to colonize Palestine. So that's the major difference. Okay, the Dutch had no business in being in Indonesia. They had no connection to Indonesia. They came and colonized Indonesia for 400 years, and created some terrible carnage. And then when they were politely asked to leave, they didn't want to, which I understand. But we're not in the same situation. We're not a colonial power. That's, I think, one of the biggest problems many Palestinians have with the way they're looking at it. They look at it as a colonial power, but we're not. Okay, there are certain aspects of what we do which may remind people of colonialism, but our connection to the country is to the land is firm, and it's just as firm as that of the Palestinians. Okay, or just as firm or not firm. So that's a huge difference, and the world community recognized that when it went for the partition decision, the partition resolution in 1947, and split the land into 2, one part for Israel and the other part for the Palestinians, something the Palestinians refused to accept at the time and still have difficulty with. So we're still in that situation where we are fighting over a piece of land which already has been decided that it should belong to both of us, part of it to Israel, part of it to Palestine, and we have to get our act together. Okay, so that's what I have to say on this. Mark,
just to add a word or 2 about that, Rebecca. As you know, Israel not only doesn't occupy Gaza, but it actually Gaza was been ruling itself now for well over 20 years or more. That's number 1, and number 2, as Emmanuel said, and quite clearly, Israel agrees. And the vast body politic, the majority, except for the extreme right in Israel, agreed that there has to be 2 states sitting side by side, Israel and Palestine. I was the advisor of Shimon Peres during the Oslo Accords when we recognized the Palestinian right to 2 states. We agreed to it. We spoke to the PLO, etc. It didn't work out for a number of reasons, including reasons inside of Israel. As you will recall, Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated by a fanatical fascist thug, I have no other words to call him, and that was one of the main reasons why, or one of the serious reasons why it went downhill. So no, we have no wish to be any type of colonization. We have no wish to prevent, and the majority of us, no wish to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state side by side, but we will not and we cannot accept that Palestine will come in place of Israel. That is suicidal. I don't believe that anyone, and certainly it's not Indonesian policy, or the policy of the Indonesians, that we will accept, okay, let's disappear from the face of the earth, and from the river to the sea, as you hear all over the place, Palestine will be free, which basically means from the Mediterranean until the Jordan River, there will be no Israel. And that is not something which is plausible, palpable, and certainly won't happen. I also would like to say that despite the trials and the tribulations that the Indonesians went through under Dutch occupation, I don't recall hundreds or thousands of, I don't recall because it didn't happen, thousands of Indonesians taking to the streets and burning families alive, Dutch families alive, slaughtering innocent men, women, and children, massacring over thousands and thousands of people in their beds. That didn't happen because we're not dealing here with a liberation movement. We're not dealing here with somebody who wants to live side by side, with a grouping that wants to live side by side with Israel. We're talking here of a savage group of butchers infused with hate, destruction, and basically the dissipation of the state of Israel.
Unfortunately, we're not going to get to all the questions that have been posted here, but I would just like to end with this one last question. We have somebody in the group who has said, many Indonesians actually shared Israelis' grievances against Islamist radicalism. However, it isn't easy for them, for Indonesians, to publicly express their sympathy with Israel because of due to radical threats that they might face. Given the sensitivities involved, what do you think are the best possible ways for improving Indonesia-Israel relations? Emmanuel.
I think much of what Rebecca is doing is exactly that, working on the civil society, expanding the relations, the indirect relations to both NGOs talking to each other, and of course commercial ties, which fortunately have been going on for many years and are expanding. They could be expanding even more. That will eventually deliver. I think that's what we have to do. We have to keep doing what we're doing. Expand the relations in civil society through communal action between activities between communities in Israel and between communities in Indonesia, and again the commercial relations. There is a huge potential there. Okay, right now the commercial relations are maybe to the tune of $500 million a year. When you compare that to what we have with Turkey, with a country we have diplomatic relations with, but not particularly good relations. Okay, we have $6 billion worth of trade going both directions. That's with Turkey, which is a country much smaller than Indonesia. So the potential with Indonesia is really huge both ways. And reminds us that there's a lot of work to do, which can be done beyond diplomatic relations and out of the limelight also. And again, between the communities, I think that's along the things that Rebecca does already. I think it's very important.
Yeah, if I can add a few words here, I think it's important to mention that Indonesia has a free press, and if we're asked in a free public opinion, you can express yourself. It's not I don't know. I'll be open. It's not China. It's not North Korea by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that the opening of the press to different points of view, and not to just the one-sided block view that Israel is the be-all and end-all of all evil, which it certainly isn't. Doesn't make us into supermen and women, but we're certainly not the be-all and end-all, the credo of being everything that is hateful in the world. The opposite is the case. We have contributed so much to international civilization and society for a country of our size. And I think that the opening of the media is important. I agree entirely with Emmanuel that commercial relations, trade relations, but I don't think it stops there. And I will be a little bit self-centered, if I might be, for a moment. I don't mean this in any patronizing or condescending way, because I'm not that type of person, but I do also believe that Indonesia has something to gain, a lot to gain from a relationship with Israel. In the field of technology, in the field of water management, in the field of agriculture, in the fields of which Israel is really the world's leader or among the world leaders, which we would so much like to impart to Indonesia. It's such a huge country with so many intelligent and good people that we could do that, which is made that much more difficult in the fact that we can't get in, really, that we have no that it's very difficult for this people-to-people relationship to move forward. So all in all around, there are lots that Indonesians can do: petition politicians, press, social media, etc. And yes, be critical of Israel. We need criticism. I honestly mean that. We need criticism, especially from friends. Not just if Iran comes out and criticizes Israel, it means nothing to us. But when people and countries which are civilized, forward-looking, moderate, come out and say that Israel should do A, B, and C instead of D, E, and F, we listen. And we aren't superhuman, we aren't perfect, and we do try to correct our ways if that's necessary. No country is, and we are no different from any other country.
I just want to add that again, like Mark indicated, the press has an important role to play here. I think the press is not covering Israel the way it should be. It's not covering Israel at all, and if it covers Israel, it covers in a not even-handed way, which is understandable. Okay, but there's a wide range of publications in Indonesia, and they should come here and look for themselves more than anything else, and not just use information that they've been provided by Arab stations and Arab elements. So I invite, there may be members of the press on this webinar. I invite them to come here and see for themselves and have a look at it and publish what they see, because it's worthwhile. Thank you.
I'd also just like to add, just from the perspective of the Israel-Asia Center, in terms of ways to improve Israel-Indonesia relations, the Israel-Asia Center is engaged in a number of initiatives to do just that. Some of them we're very open about, some of them less open. If you go to our website, you can see at least some ways to get involved in that. Certainly as participants on our Israel-Indonesia Futures program, but also for business people, there are other ways as well to engage between the two countries. There's tremendous untapped potential between Israel and Indonesia in a range of areas, and so much scope for cooperation in education, in different areas of tech, such as mobility and EVs, clean tech, agri-tech, water tech, healthcare, and med tech, and in so many other areas. And I really would encourage you to reach out either to the Israel-Asia Center with regards to our Israel-Indonesia programs, or to Emmanuel if you're looking at doing business between the two countries under the umbrella, and if he can help under the umbrella of the Israel-Indonesia Chamber of Commerce. So lots of ways to engage and to do so quietly even, but still very successfully. So I really do encourage you to reach out to us. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we've run a little bit over time here. And I'm sorry we couldn't answer all of your questions. If you have any other questions, please do reach out to us over email or through our website. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.